I know Steve Blanchard was giving a little talk upstairs regarding the remembering place, the columbarium and the pavers. So I hope most of the folks who were listening to that have now made it down here, and we'll get started. I think everybody knows Desmond. Before he left to go off on his adventure, he was a jack of all trades here, assisting minister, choir. What else did you? Lawnmower, tent putter upper. He did all kinds of things, and we are so glad to have him back. But not for the reason that he is back, and he's going to tell you about that.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Thanks for all being here today. Everybody here in person and everyone online as well. It's nice to be back. It's been a while. So, I just want to kind of give you a little bit of catching up on what I've been doing over the past about 7 to 8 months since I left back in July. And so that way you can sort of know where I was, where I am, and where I'm going. So we are ready, Chris?
We are ready.
Okay. So back in July, you may remember back in the spring, the Mission Endowment Fund granted me some money so that way I'd be able to do some disaster relief and kind of do a little bit of travel while at the same time I was working as a PT assistant on travel assignments, but also doing a little bit of volunteer work and disaster relief work wherever I happened to be. So that was in the spring, and then in July, I hit the road, and you should just be able to hit the space bar.
Is that it?
Yeah, but you need to expand the screen or something. No.
Right hand corner. The button down the bottom. Oh, left.
Because you're not on the slideshow.
Oh. Open with Google Slides.
And then if you hit the
with
slide where it says slide, no. So this is different than one. Oh, there it is. There we go. Now just hit the space bar. Good. All right. So so here's my rig. I was heading west. I stopped at this campground in Wyoming, which is a nice campground that was managed by the U.S. Forest Service. It's called the Vedawu campground. Just, a place to stop right along I-80 on my way west. And so I just had a picture of that. So I figured at least you can kind of see, what it looked like as I was traveling. So previous to my leaving here, you may recall that there was a lot of flooding, etc., in the area of Yellowstone National Park, which is in the area where you've got a combination of Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. They're all kind of like connected in that area of the country. And so there was a lot of rain and flooding. And so that kind of really spread and caused a lot of issues with flooding, not just in that area where the park is, but also widespread. So if you go to the next slide, please. So this is just a picture I got off the internet that showed the Yellowstone River, I believe is what that's called. And that's just just to kind of give an idea of what was going on. One more slide, please. So I have a friend who is a pastor at a community church in Red Lodge, Montana. And she's a friend of mine from back east when I used to live in New York State. And so Red Lodge was an area that was hit pretty hard, had never had flooding in its history. So this was the first time they'd ever had any flooding. So it was a very serious situation. And as you can see on the left, that was a photo of the actual flood in progress. And then those two pictures to the right are the same building after the fact. Now, if you kind of look at the picture in the middle, you can see the stream or the river off to the right of that building. The picture on the left is the stream or the river on the front or left of that building. So you can see that was going right down Main Street. That is Main Street that river is now going down. So it was very serious, and there was a lot of problems with houses, especially in that area closer to where the river breached its banks and started to flow down that Main Street. So this is one of the first things you see when you drive into town, is this building. Apparently the owner who built this place many years ago refused to leave until they actually had to come in and carry him out. He just did not want to leave because he had built this place by hand. Anyway, so as you can see, it was pretty much a total loss for the most part. They were still trying to figure out what to do. So go ahead, next slide. So here is the Red Lodge Community Church. This was where my friend is pastor, Pam Peterson. And so she had said that they had a little bit of damage in their basement area. As you can see, they were able to just cut about 2 feet of drywall off of the floor area in the basement, throughout the whole basement of the building. And they had to, of course, remove insulation and that kind of thing, or whatever else had gotten wet. But they were pretty easily able to get to all of the wet areas just by going that 2 feet up, which made it really convenient, because then all you had to do was just replace 2 feet of drywall. So you take a 4-foot sheet of drywall, cut it in half, and it basically fit in those areas. So that made it a very easy fix. Go ahead, next slide. So here I am kind of helping to replace some of that drywall. The picture on the right is an area that I had already finished, and I was just finishing up that rest of that room in the corner. They were trying to really get that room particularly done first, because that was like their nursery area, Sunday school area, and they had nursery that they wanted to start getting ready to go, because this was now August, well, actually the end of July. It was very end of July. So they were kind of under a little bit of a time crunch trying to get that ready to go for the start of the school year, etc. So that's why we started there. We also did a lot of insulation replacement, not just in these rooms, but also like in the hallway, in the bathrooms. I mean, the whole lower area. As you can imagine, if you just think about this whole downstairs of our building, having to have drywall and insulation replaced, that's kind of what they were up against, because it was about the same size area. You know, their kitchen area was pretty good, but the fellowship hall, the other rooms, the bathrooms, the hallways, pretty much everything was damaged. Go ahead, next slide. Of course, there was also a lot of issues with areas in the neighborhood. So there was a lot of sand and stone that had been carried in from the river. And so as a result of that, they had to move all of that sand and stone. Well, that's not easy to do. So this house is right behind where Pam's house is. So Pam's house is kind of like, you can see a roof line directly beyond that fence on the left. That was her house where she's renting. And so this was her back door neighbor. And her neighbor could not get her truck into this area, which is basically her parking area. So it was just filled up with sand, and she would get in there with her little pickup truck, and she couldn't go anyplace because she would get stuck. So I just went out there one day, and I just was, shoveling, sand and getting it out of the driveway for her so she could park again back in her spot. I started by using that wheelbarrow. Well, that didn't work too well, because trying to push that wheelbarrow through the sand, that didn't work. So I had to then carry shovel by shovel across the alley, because there was an alley right there. So I had to cross the alley and toss it up on the other side of the alley where there was like garage space and that kind of thing. But it was just an area just to dump that sand. So anyway, that took me a good couple of hours or so of just kind of shoveling and carrying sand. So anyway, good for my strength.
What did they do with all of that?
Well, so they had just come through. Actually, they hadn't gotten through that area yet. They were working their way down those alleys with bucket trucks and all that kind of thing, so they just hauled out our way. So they hadn't quite gotten down to this area of the town yet. This was closer to the first pictures that you saw with that house that was kind of affected by that flooding. This was about maybe 3 blocks, 2 blocks, 3 blocks, probably 3 blocks from that other house. So this was right in the area that was pretty heavily affected. So they were starting more up on the other side of town and working their way down this way because it was easier to start up there because there wasn't as much sand and all that kind of thing to move. And so they were working their way down the alleys and then just kind of getting those up with front loaders and that kind of thing, putting them onto dump trucks and just hauling it away, putting it back in the creek, I'm assuming, I don't know. Right. But they were just getting rid of it. So it was just a mess. I mean, you can just imagine. Okay, next slide. So when I left here, I was thinking of getting, pretty involved in doing some disaster relief. And I ended up staying in the Red Lodge area for about 10 days. I was there doing some help and work in that area. But then I realized that when I got to Oregon, so Oregon was where I ended up working for my first travel assignment as a PT assistant. There was no disaster needs in the Oregon area. There had been some wildfires and that kind of thing more on the western end of the state. I was more in the eastern end of the state. But there was really, that was kind of, so it was a kind of a situation where if you weren't connected with any kind of an organization, you really couldn't do anything. So, I called Red Cross. I said, so what can I do? And they say, well, how long are you in the area? And I said, well, probably about another 3 months. They said, well, we need a 6-month commitment because of all the training that's required. So they don't want to spend money on your training and then you go and leave. So Red Cross was not an option. I thought about Salvation Army, but they're more geared toward homeless shelters and that kind of thing, more immediate needs within communities. So that wasn't really a good option either. So I ended up looking at other options and ways that I could support the community. And one of those was through a local food bank in the Vancouver, Washington area. So Vancouver, Washington is just north of Portland, Oregon, right across the river. It's on the very southern border of Washington State. So it's not Vancouver, Canada, which is above the northern part of Washington State. So I ended up going to Vancouver, Washington, and also Portland, Oregon, and did some volunteering over the course of about a week. I was there during my birthday week, because I always take the week off my birthday so that I can go to do some sightseeing, go to a hockey game, or whatever I want to do. Is kind of something I do for myself just to relax. So I ended up going and helping out there. So this is the Clark County Food Bank, which is in the area where Vancouver, Washington is. Clark County is that area of the state. I volunteered there one day. They had a whole bunch of donated food that they were putting into these banana boxes. Thank you, Doug. Into these banana boxes. And so everything was sort of already in cardboard boxes, but they wanted them to be sorted so they could be divided up into categories of whatever they needed. So, for example, dairy or meats or non-refrigerated foods and refrigerated foods and those types of things. So they could keep everything pretty well organized. So we ended up, as you can see on the right picture of that slide, those are the boxes that we packed. So there's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pallets full of those banana boxes. Plus there were a couple of more that ended up being put into the refrigerated area. So probably about 7 or 8 of those pallets full of boxes. And as you can see on that one, it says something assorted. What does that say?
Cooler, color?
Cooler. Cool. I don't think so. It says something assorted, and then the one behind it says yogurt. So anyway, so it was like a mixture of different things based on what they needed. So then once that was in that loading area, this is a non-refrigerated area, it would be loaded onto a truck. The truck would then take it to the distribution centers, and then that way it would get out to the people in the community. So go ahead, next slide. So then the next day, I ended up going to a soup kitchen in Portland, Oregon. So this is an organization that, so it was housed in a building that I think there must have been residents living upstairs in like residential areas. I don't know for sure what the arrangement was with that, or if this was just like a space that they were given to use, or if it was somehow connected to that residential facility, but it looked like it was low-income housing. And it was in an area of the city that was a very nice residential area, but you could see that it was also kind of a rundown area to some degree as well. So the soup kitchen was an area where they would serve on a regular basis. I don't know if it was every single day, but certainly they would work pretty much every day. So the day that I was there, you can see that on the right picture, we were working with having and coring squash, so that way it could be cooked and prepared for later in the week, that way they were going to then use that for a meal of some kind. Once we were done with those, so we were working with those yellow squash, I'm not sure what they were called, and then we also did some butternut squash as well. And during that whole process, of course, you get a lot of seeds, right? There's all these seeds that you're just kind of dumping into those buckets there. And so I said to the guy who was the manager, I said, so have you ever thought about maybe trying to keep some of these seeds and clean them off, and then you could use them for protein or that kind of thing? You could like dry them and bag them up and hand them out for people that need them for whatever their needs are. So he thought about that a little bit and said, yeah, okay, sure, let's do some of that, because that might be a good use of some of that as well, instead of just putting into a compost pile. So we did a little bit of that too. Of course, that was not a very easy process, trying to clean the seeds out with all of that slimy center part of the squash, but it was okay. It worked out pretty good. And then we just put them on these big trays, so they just dry them out. And then, of course, after I left, I don't know what they were going to do with those at that point, but he was talking about using them in recipes. And I said, well, and also bag them up. Put them in like Ziploc bags so that people can carry them in their pocket. Gives them some little bit of nourishment, so when they're on the street, they have something that they can just pop in their mouth when they need a little bit of pick me up. Okay, next slide. So then the next day, I volunteered as a delivery person. There's this place called Stone Soup, and they make bagged meals, kind of like lunches, I guess, sandwiches and fruit and different kinds of things. And they will send them to local shelters, local schools, that kind of thing, so that way people that don't have or need to have some kind of a nutritious meal, they at least have that to start their day or to get during the middle of their day. Unfortunately, when I got there, somebody had already taken my run, and they said, oh, well, somebody already took that delivery. And I said, oh, okay, so do you have another one that I can do? And he said, well, the other one is like way out of town, and I don't want to send you there, so you can just go. So anyway, so I volunteered, but I ended up not doing anything that day. But I think part of the reason that I ended up maybe getting bumped on that was because on my way there, I got stuck at a drawbridge. And so there I am at the drawbridge, for 20 minutes, and I'm like, am I going to get there? Well, I ended up getting there right on time, but anyway, it was too late. So that was that. So, okay, I think you can go to the next slide. In the area where I was staying, which was Hermiston, Oregon, that's where I was working and living for about 5 months. I started a job there working at an assisted living / memory care facility, and it was in Hermiston, Oregon. And in that town, they have this community fellowship dinner that they provide for Thanksgiving and Christmas. And so I kind of caught wind of that. I saw an advertisement or something. And so once they started to send out information for people to volunteer or asking for help, I contacted them and said, hey, let me be a server or whatever you need me to do. So I ended up helping out for both the Thanksgiving and the Christmas dinners. I was a table server. The Thanksgiving dinner, so I took one of the later shifts so that way I could also help with cleanup. It ended up being a very slow period of time. It was like from 2 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was very slow during that time of the day. So I didn't really have a whole lot to do. In fact, I ended up closing my table down early because nobody was there, and it was just a very few people were coming in at that time. So for the Christmas dinner, when I volunteered, I was there for the whole time, which was, I think, from 11 until 3. I believe is when they were doing that. And so I, once again, was doing the serving, and I was able to help out pretty much through that whole time. So it's just a really very nice community service. I don't know who puts it on or who organizes it or whatever. I'm thinking it must have been maybe a group of churches that were kind of involved with, getting this whole thing figured out. But it was very well organized. It was held at the local high school cafeteria, and they were make use of the kitchen and everything. So it was very nice. It was a really good opportunity for people to come in and have a meal, and they would also deliver the meals too. So if people didn't want to come in, they could have them delivered. So they could request delivery of those meals, and they would be brought to their homes. Okay, so then I decided, okay, so I'm done with my job in Hermiston, Oregon. And I finished on December 23rd, which was a Friday. And I didn't have another job starting until January 16th, so 3 weeks. And I kind of planned it that way. So I had already planned to go up to Alberta, Canada, to go skiing for a few days. And then go to a Calgary Flames hockey game and just kind of do some sightseeing and that kind of thing. So the week of Christmas week, so the following after Christmas, I was just home and just kind of preparing to leave. I left on January 1st and drove north. It was about maybe an 8 or 9 hour drive. I stopped halfway there and stayed overnight someplace and then went the rest of the way. Well, this is what you see as you're driving into Banff National Park. I mean, unbelievable, right? I mean, just the views are incredible. So this is right down the expressway. I'm driving along. I've got my phone right here, and I'm kind of like, push the button. Okay, come on. So anyway, beautiful, beautiful. Go ahead, next slide. And then I ended up going skiing up at Lake Louise ski area. So this is at the top of that ski area looking out over the mountains. And you can kind of see a little bit of the ski slopes there off to the right. But mostly it's just the nice views. So I was at Lake Louise one day, and then that was on a Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, I went to Banff Sunshine ski area. The snow was not very good. They hadn't really had as much snow as they normally would have. So it was kind of skied off quite a bit. It was pretty, I mean, what most people would think of as icy, I think of it more of as like Eastern skiing conditions, which is where I kind of grew up, and I'm used to that. But so it wasn't like, you're thinking about skiing out west, you're thinking of powder. Well, it wasn't that. It was pretty well skied out. You had to be careful. Some of the areas you had to watch for rocks and things like that too, because it was pretty thin. So anyway, so it was a challenge, but it was still nice. It was beautiful, and I mean, look at the day. I mean, just gorgeous. Bright sunny day. The next day when I was at Banff, sunshine was not quite as sunny. It was a little more overcast. And they had gotten a little bit of snow the night before, so that was good. It was a little bit of a cover on top of everything else, so that made that day a little bit better. I was going to also ski on the Thursday, but I decided not to because my goddaughter was flying in from Syracuse, New York. She had planned to come out and join me for that Thursday through Monday. She was going to go back, and we were just going to do some sightseeing in the Calgary area. So I decided not to ski on Thursday because I had been, I was pretty tired after skiing a couple of days here. And so I just left on Thursday morning, picked her up at the airport, and that's how we kind of started our get together that way. So this is my goddaughter, Adrienne. And so this was in Banff, in the village of Banff, kind of up on the top of an area called Rimrock. And there you can kind of see in the background some beautiful views, but also there's a hot springs right there. So we decided we were going to go to the hot springs. So we went up there, and you have to pay, of course. It's not just something that you go to. So we sat in these hot springs for maybe an hour or a little bit more, and just kind of really enjoyed this really beautiful scenery and just the really warm, the warm hot springs, and it was pretty crowded. I mean, there was more people in that hot spring than what that picture shows on the right. By the time we got down in there, it was pretty well crowded, but it was okay. You had room to move, and you could sit on the side a little bit if you needed to as well. But that was just really nice, just to kind of have a day just kind of hanging out. So on that Friday, we went to a Calgary Flames hockey game. So that was really fun. And in that middle picture, you can see the picture of the Saddle Dome, which is where the Flames play. That is in the process of being replaced. They're going to build another arena. I think it's probably going to be in that open area just to the left of the arena that you can see. There's like an open area of land. I believe that's where they're building the new one. I'm not sure, but that seems to be right. Because the old one, I mean, I was talking to someone, we were in the at the game. The person on my right was a season ticket holder, and he was like, yeah, these were great seats. We were like on the second level up. We had beautiful seats. He says, yeah, but you don't want to be sitting way up there. And I said, way up where? He says, up in the top of the saddle, like up in the top of those wings. They're sitting up there. So you're like way up, and you can't even hardly see anything except for maybe just the ice. You can't even see the scoreboard from up there. So they had to put TV screens so that people could see the scoreboard. And I'm like, wow, I'm glad I didn't get seats up there. That would have been ridiculous. So anyway, so that middle picture was we were at the top of the Calgary Tower, similar to like the CN Tower or the Space Needle in Seattle, where it has like a rotating restaurant in the top. And so we went up there, and on that Saturday or Sunday, whatever day it was, and we were just kind of hanging out and had lunch and everything. And then we ended up going to, on the right is the Calgary Library, which is a brand new library. Beautiful, beautiful. I mean, they had a special display going on there about the Holocaust right at that time, where there was a whole bunch of pictures of individuals who had survived the Holocaust and the story that they had written down a little bit about their experience. So there was a lady there that was kind of giving a little bit of a talk, and one of her grandmothers, I think, was one of the people on one of those panels. And so she was kind of giving a little bit of an overall discussion, but she was also talking about individual people that she sort of recognized and knew from stories that she had heard. So anyway, so that was just an amazing place just to kind of hang out. And, Calgary is a beautiful cosmopolitan city. I mean, just very neat, clean, modern. A lot of, as you can see, a lot of those buildings are glass structures. So just very, very upscale. Okay, so now comes the fun part. So on that Sunday, January 8th, that was the last day that we were going to be there. We were going to both leave on Monday. She was going to fly home, and I was going to drive back to Oregon. We had gone to the space or the science center on Sunday morning, early afternoon, and spent, probably a good 3 hours there, had lunch there, that kind of thing. So as we were deciding to leave, we were walking back to the C train, which is the commuter rail that they have there in the Calgary area. And we're just walking along, nothing out of the usual. And all of a sudden, I felt a very sharp pull in my carotid arteries. And I don't know what that was, but it just kind of stopped me in my tracks. And it's like, what was that? So my goddaughter says, "Are you okay?" I says, "Well, I don't know. I just felt this really sharp pull in my carotid arteries of my neck. And I don't know exactly what the heck that is. I felt fine otherwise, but I still had this feeling of tension right in my neck and a little bit up into the jaw too, where everything kind of connects. But nothing else. I mean, it didn't seem like anything else was very, out of the ordinary, but it was just this weird thing." So there was a bench not too far away. We sat down on the bench and she was, kind of checking my vitals and all that kind of thing. Just so happens she's an ER nurse, by the way. So I was with the right person. So she had an Apple Watch. She put the watch on my wrist because that can kind of sense your BP or your heart rate and that kind of thing. And plus she was, trying to get a feeling of, what does one side feel like to the other? She knows if there was a little bit of a difference in my pulse from one side to the other, stuff like that I would never even think of, but she was sort of on top of that. So, we were talking about it and, after a few minutes, she's like, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "Do you want to go to the ER?" And I said, I think we better. Let's go and check this out. I don't know. I feel okay, but I don't want to find out that there's something really serious going on here and then not have made the right decision. So luckily, there was a hospital not too far away. We were able to walk to the ER or to the train. Went like, I think 1 or 2 stops, caught an Uber, and then the hospital was like right there. It was like maybe 2 blocks or so, Uber drive. Okay, go to the next slide. So as we were getting there, things were still pretty good. But then, of course, you're sitting in the ER, and there's a lot of people in the ER, just like anywhere, any place. So I sat down on a chair, just kind of sitting to wait. Adrienne was in line waiting to get up to the front. So she starts really kind of pushing the issue. There's something going on. There's something going on. Well, it wasn't a heart attack. It was something totally different, but there was definitely something going on. And so within about maybe a half an hour or so, it probably hadn't even been that long, but I had started to kind of fade. I was starting to be a little bit more tired, and I just was kind of like my vision had changed a little bit. I had a little bit of residual or a little bit of referral pain into my back, but it wasn't like it was a sharp, like dagger type of thing. It was just like an achiness. So anyway, so they had already done a little triage on me, but they didn't think that there was anything really serious going on at that time. Well, she did not agree with that, and she pushed. Basically, she saved my life.
Yeah.
And so the nurse came back out again. And by then I was kind of slumped in my chair. And they hurried me back to the back area. I have no idea how I got there, because by then I was pretty much out of it. I don't know if I would say I was unconscious, but I certainly was pretty close to it. They brought me in for a CT scan, and they saw that there was something definitely going on with my heart, that there was blood that was pooling into areas where it shouldn't have been. And so they transferred me over to Foothills Medical Center, which is the #1 cardiac hospital in Canada. How do you do that? Excuse me for being so emotional. So by the time that I got to the Foothills, that was probably about, I don't know, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And this was maybe an hour, hour and a half after I got to the ER. And I was in surgery then about 3 hours later for 12 to 13 hours of surgery. So let's go to the next slide. This is what I had. I'll let you read it. So basically, my aorta, which is the main artery in your heart, the main artery in my heart had developed an aneurysm, which is just a bulging of that area of the heart, or whatever artery it is that you're talking about. And then along with that, there was a tear that happened within the inner lining of the heart, as you can see in that right photo or the right side of that diagram, where then you have blood that starts getting into an area that it's not supposed to. So basically what it means is that you have the inner layer of your aorta, in this case, separating from the middle layer of your aorta and blood flowing in between those two layers. So I mean, looking at that picture on the right side of that photo, it doesn't look like it's all that serious. However, if that continues to bulge, and then it starts to then breach, then you have a real issue. And of course, then there's also concerns about blood clots and all that kind of thing, where you get blood getting caught up into an area where it's not supposed to be, and then blood starts clotting. And then you end up, with throwing a clot, and then you have a stroke, and I mean that just causes all other issues. So anyway, that's what I had. And I think that picture right there is a much milder version of what I had. So let's go to the next slide. So this is what they had to do. So they had to bypass the area where the aneurysm was. They had to do a total aortic arch replacement. So the arch in that right picture with the red diagram is the aorta. So it goes up and over and down, kind of like an arch, like the St. Louis arch. So they had to replace that arch with a grafted. They used some kind of a gel and other, like some kind of a fabric weave type of material. So it wasn't like they were taking from my body someplace and then transplanting. They were using synthetic material. So they replaced the arch. They also had to replace the ascending, so the part of the aorta that goes up from the middle part of the heart. They had to replace that as well. Remember I talked about that pulling in my carotid arteries. They had to graft in new carotid arteries, the beginnings of those areas, and also the innominate artery, which is one of those others. So there's 3 arteries you can see coming off the top of the aorta. 2 of those are the carotids, and then the other one's the innominate. The innominate just feeds to another part of the body. I think it also eventually gets into like brachial arteries and that kind of thing as well. So they had to replace that, or not replace, they had to graft in some new tissue for that. Now, during this whole process of my dissection, apparently my aortic valve had dropped. And that was, I think, the pulling that I felt initially, is that when this aneurysm happened, I think that there was some kind of a release of the aortic valve that everything just kind of dropped. And that's why I felt that pull in my neck. So the aortic valve, as you can see on that picture, is at the very left bottom of that red artery where you can see it says aortic valve. They had to resuspend that because it had dropped. So they had to put it back in place where it was supposed to be, and then make sure that that was where it was, going to be secured, etc. And then they also had to do a like a catheterization of my right axillary artery. So they weren't just working in the center of my chest, but they also had to work a little bit along my right, just below the clavicle, because they had to get a stent in that artery as well, just to help with blood flow. Pretty major. Here's all my blessings. How do you count this? And as you can see, there are a lot of things that were working in my favor, and none of which is any more significant than the other, but they all just kind of add up to being a very important part of this whole process. The surgeon that I had was amazing. He had the most amazing bedside manner. When he came to talk to me after the surgery, he spent probably a good half hour with me. When they're doing their rounds, they usually come in, they say, "How you doing? Oh, let's take a look at your vitals. Thing looks good. Okay. Cough a little bit. Okay, feels good. Feeling all right? Good. See you tomorrow." Out they go, right? Not this guy. He was asking questions, and then he wanted me to ask questions. Is there anything else? Do you have any other questions? My sister was there at the time. He was just, it's like you didn't feel rushed with him. He was waiting for you to be done with that visit. One of the things that I needed, if you look in that the middle bullet that says surgeon agreed, in order for me to be able to be discharged from the hospital, I had to have a primary care physician who had agreed to take my care in the interim. Now, because I'm not a Canadian citizen and I had no connections to the Calgary area, I didn't have anybody there. Trying to find somebody was difficult, to say the least. Everybody that we tried calling, "Oh yeah, we can see you in a few weeks." I said, "Well, this is not the few weeks type of scenario. We need to see you like within a week." Because that's what they needed. So someone to see me within a week after discharge. "Oh, well, so where do you live?" "I live in, Oregon/South Dakota/Iowa. "Oh, well, we can't take people just for a short, you know how that goes." So anyway, so my surgeon agreed to be my PCP, my GP. And he's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll just see you, once or twice if you need to before you go," and that kind of thing. So another thing that actually I forgot to mention was I had a pneumothorax, which is basically a small air bubble in my left lung. So that had to be reabsorbed into my system before they were going to allow me to fly. If I had gotten on an airplane without that air bubble being totally resolved, it could have then expanded and caused other issues, and then maybe a lung collapse and all that kind of stuff too if it got bad enough. So I had to wait, a couple of weeks after discharge before I was able to fly. So I had to find a place to stay. I had to find a primary care physician. And it's like, how do you do that? Well, it happened. So there's another blessing that I didn't put up there, and that is the place where I stayed for my respite care was a place that was very similar to Oak Knoll. I kind of liken it to Oak Knoll because it was very, it felt a little more upscale. It was very clean. It was very well staffed. People were very friendly. The food was amazing. It just felt like you were cared for there. And the gal that was in charge of she was like in charge of the sales department. So, she was doing a sale, of course, but she was bending over backwards. She actually identified a doctor locally that would take my case if I needed it. But I ended up going with my surgeon, of course. But she actually called around and she found someone that would take me as part of my care. When I told her, okay, well, we've got another option, so we appreciate that, but we're not going to need to do that. And then she found she had this respite suite. There was a couple of respite suites. Got me in for that. At the spur of the moment. There was really no waiting for that at all. I just had to wait for discharge. There was nursing on staff so they could keep track of my vitals and all that kind of thing. So anyway, all of these things just kind of add up to a most amazing journey. So another one too was the Holiday Inn Express where Adrian and I had been staying. That's where my truck was. So, because I had driven up there, well, normally they would be charging people $15 a day for parking. They didn't charge me anything. 28 days, my truck was sitting there, and they didn't charge me a penny. How does that happen? Oh my God.
What about the insurance from your RV club membership?
So that was something that kind of, sort of, was unexpected. I had joined this RV club because my permanent address is South Dakota right now. That way I could use South Dakota as my mail forwarding address. So South Dakota has a lot of mail forwarding companies where you can basically pay for a subscription, I guess you call it, and they then forward your mail to you either on a scheduled basis or you just call them and say, hey, send my mail. So, it's an annual fee. You pay a certain amount and then you pay for postage and all these other things. So this RV club, which was the FMCA, Family Motor Coach of America, I think, or Family Motor Coach Association, one of their benefits that comes as a benefit to its members without any extra cost is this repatriation insurance. So that if you are traveling more than 75 miles away from your home, they will pay to have your rig returned to your home. And they will bring you to your home. And whatever it is that you need returned, yourself, your equipment, your rig, your RV, whatever it is that you have. Now, of course, I didn't have my RV with me in Canada. It's still in Oregon now. So I just had my pickup truck. So when I contacted this company, they had to have records and, can you show us, your doctor's note that says that you're not able to drive, first of all. And, that we need to be able to get everything rolling. So anyway, after we got the ball rolling, they paid for everything. Business class. That was in my doctor's note. I said to the doctor, I said, I think it would be a good idea to fly business class and get a little more room so I don't feel like I'm quite so crowded. I'm going to need a meal, that kind of thing. And so he just wrote that in his note, and that was something that they provided. So, yeah, ground transportation, everything taken care of, no cost.
An experience like this could have bankrupted you.
And it is maybe going to do that. because it's still, I haven't paid my bills yet. Luckily, it was in Canada. So if I was in America, the bill would be probably 3 times higher. So I'm still waiting for all the numbers to come in. My health insurance is gap insurance. So because I had stopped my job, I just needed something just to fill the gap before my new job started. So, you know, it's not really perfect in terms of what they pay. I have to pay $10,000 out of pocket first, and then they only pay 50% after that. So anyway, so I'm just kind of waiting for all the numbers to come around. It's going to take some time. Every once in a while, I'll get a call. Hey, this is, you know, so-and-so from Dr. So-and-so's office. He was the ER doc, you know. So anyway, so another blessing there toward the bottom of the list is my friend Sandra, who is here today. She is my tenant, who is a travel nurse here at the university. She's renting my spare room. And you've been here since November, is it? October. Wow. So she, her initial contract was going to be up in the very beginning of January, but she decided to extend until the middle of April. And so when this all happened, I said, hey, Sandra, when I get home, would you be willing to kind of support me if I need support for whatever needs to be done? She's like, yeah, sure, you can do that. So another one of my blessings. So thank you, Sandra. So, I mean, it just continues. So I was unable to drive for 6 weeks. Today is 6 weeks. They're saying 3 to 4 months after surgery before I can get back to work. I really haven't started cardiac rehab yet because I haven't connected with a cardiologist here in the area here yet. So I don't know when that's going to actually start. Don't even have an appointment with them yet. I saw my primary care on Friday, and so we just kind of got that referral process going for all that. So, but they're saying that I should be able to get back to full recovery and full activity. Just can't do like heavy weightlifting and that kind of thing. So go ahead. One more.
So is Iowa your home?
So I'm living here now. Yes, I have a condo in Coralville. My address is South Dakota. My condo is under my LLC because I was using it as a rental property. And I think there might be some legal issues if I claim that as my home, because it's my LLC. They might kind of look at that sort of like, I mean, if this is your LLC, how come you're living there? It's supposed to be a rental property. So I'm just kind of skirting that system a little bit by staying in South Dakota by my official address.
Desmond.
So there's my final word. I don't know exactly what my future holds. I know who holds my future.
So I was up getting coffee, and so I missed the first intro.
So it's all going to be online. You can watch the whole thing if you need to. I'm not sure where to find it though. I was looking at the website yesterday to try to find previous adult forums, and I didn't know where to look.
Okay.
So how do you find it, Chris? No?
I do, but I'll have to look and I can put that in the Monday evening blast.
That would be good.
Well, I had a question about that.
Okay.
Did they ever say that part of your problem was all the lifting and the moving and up and down and all the muscles you were using? Did that have anything to?
No.
No.
No rhyme or reason. So this condition is not very common, but it does happen probably with more frequency than people realize. And there's no reason for it. It just, whether it's some kind of a weakening of the blood vessels or that kind of thing. There was some question about whether or not I have a history in my family of Marfan's syndrome. So Marfan's syndrome is a syndrome where you have some connective tissue disorder. It's also something that's very common. So you can see maybe have the sunken chest. Okay. So what's called pectus excavatum is a characteristic of Marfan's. I don't know. My mom had this. My sister has the opposite. Her chest kind of bulges out a little bit. So I'm going to be tested for that to see if that might be an issue.
It's hereditary.
Yes, because there might be some kind of genetic clue. Yeah.
My dad had a aortic aneurysm bubble, but it never, they watched it very carefully and it did not grow. So they didn't ever have to do surgery. But they did say it's an inherited thing, often genetically inherited.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been checked for an aneurysm and they couldn't find anything. I don't know if you can develop one. I haven't subsequently been checked. That's about 10 years ago.
Sure.
But maybe that's something that needs to be done regularly if you can develop them. But my dad did have the bubble. It did not expand at all. So he never had to have surgery.
Yeah, so for people online, he was just saying that his dad had a bubble in his aorta that never actually developed into a more serious condition that needed surgical intervention. But because this is a possible, there is genetic connection to this type of a thing, that he is checked regularly to make sure that he doesn't develop something similar to that as well. So,
and I had a pastor friend who also had the problem. In fact, passed away during surgery. So that's, I mean, your story there is very.
So one of the things the surgeon said to me was that 20 to 25% of the patients don't go out of that surgery.
Another drug.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we never know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah.
And, I want to thank you for your service.
Yes.
I also want to thank you for all the service that came back.
Yeah.
And back to Red Lodge, I've been there many times.
Yeah.
And that was an embarking place for a backpacking group that I go with. And on one of those trips, we were up at the top in Wind River Range, up about 13,000 feet. And one of our colleagues with us got stroke. And we got somehow, just similar to all of the things that happened with you, we were able to get her off that mountain.
Yeah.
Yet she survived.
Yeah. Divine intervention. So anyway, so if anybody missed parts of the presentation, or if you know anyone that wasn't here that wants to know, more of the story, it would first of all help me to not have to repeat my story over and over and over again, because that's very fatiguing for me. And so anyway, it will be posted on the Gloria Dei website.
I'll give instructions on how to find it.
Yeah, Chris will get instructions. I'll put that in the Monday email blast so that people know how to find it. So that way, if you want to look for it, you'll know where to find it. So thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful.
Desmond.
Sunday we will start with our lesson study, and next Sunday will be the introduction. So don't have your materials down upstairs. We've got materials. Look, it's here.
You were there.
So I got there.
You were there.
Where are you going?
Thank you.
And also, looks like you have a big gap.